Buyur. So I should just say that I hope everything is well and that the road rash is clearing up and that when you're showering there's not too much blood on the floor of the shower.
Yeah, just a little whoopsie, but it's fine. It's all good, mate.
So here's the plan for today. We didn't feel that we could leave our club members all summer without any bonus content. So, especially with the big few months of racing, we've rolled the pod back out for this very special bonus episode. Today's guest wasn't really a very well-kept secret, insofar as we actually did tell our fellow members that we'd get him on, and they sent in their suggestions for topics.
Yeah, typical Chairman Tom activity there, really, isn't it? Getting everyone to do your work basically. But so what did they go for anyway?
They went for Grand Tours.
Nice, pretty, yeah. I would have gone for that as well, to be fair.
Are Grand Tours really, like, let's say you watch nothing else as a cycling fan, would you, and you just watch Grand Tours, you'd still have a great time, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure, yeah. They've just got everything, you know, bunch sprints, breakaways, big mountains, you know, cobbles even, you know, white roads, dirt roads in Italy. Yeah, they've just got a bit of everything, and I think, but they are completely different as well, because they're obviously 3 weeks. The next longest race up to that is Tour Swiss, which is like 9 days. So, yeah, they just goes into that uncharted territory really, which, yeah, you really feel it when you do your first one, that's for sure. But I think it definitely, yeah, it brings you on a hell of a lot.
I'm trying to think of a clumsy metaphor, because they are all separate and they all have their own character. So help me out here, like, because the Tour is almost like the rock god, isn't it? It's almost like the established superstar who's released like 5, 10 massive albums. And then the Giro is like the sort of slightly more hipster, slightly more scene stuff band. And then the Vuelta is the band that's sort of been ticking along in the background and no one took that much notice. But actually recently they've released some great albums.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you know, the Vuelta's kind of experiments a bit, you know, went shorter stages, things like that. But yeah, Italy definitely it's more like the purist as well, you know. It's kind of like, it's those sort of coffee drinkers that really know their coffee, or think they know their coffee, you know, they like to talk. But no, Italy is just yeah, special, just different. Like the Tour has got the whole circus and the whole branding, whereas Italy is a bit more sort of for the purist, but all great racing and all great races, eh?
Do you end up, when you ride them, do you end up simultaneously loving them and obviously wanting to be there, but also a little part of you hating a bit of it?
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're on a bad day, especially if you've had a little whoopsie, or if you've gone there to try to win the GC or something, and something happens and you drop out of that, then that's obviously massively disappointing. But you know, when you sit back and like now, for instance, when I look back and I've ridden however many tours, I think 10 of Vuelta and like 4 Giros maybe, and you know, if it was just to think when I was a kid and like just doing those many races, those races that many times, I'd just be over the moon and ecstatic about anyway, you know. So you've got to pinch yourself sometimes and just sort of take a step back and just realise pretty lucky to be able to do it. So but yeah, you certainly go through some rough moments, and Grand Tours, I think, if you can get through them and go through those bad, really dark places, mentally and physically, I think you can come out so much stronger and better for it, and not necessarily go back and, you know, win stages in the Tour, but other races then you can you certainly perform better in them. Yeah, there's only one person to talk Grand Tours with, really, isn't there, Tom? And of course, we've gone and got a guy who's won only 7. That's 4 Tour de France's, a Giro d'Italia, and 2 Vuelta Espanias. Welcome to the GTCC, Chris Froome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
Chris, there's an obvious place to start before we get into Grand Tours. Because you've been a teammate of Geraint's in 2 different locations, at Barlow back at the start, and then at Sky. So what's he like as a teammate? We know what he's like on a podcast. What's he really like as a teammate?
Yeah, so I mean, what is it, G? We've been teammates now for, what was it, 12 years? Up until the end of last year?
Yeah, from 2009, I think, wasn't it?
2008? 2008, I
Sorry,
joined Barlow. Yeah, so it's a good 12 years. Oh, sorry. I've got, I'm in a house with 6 other people using the kitchen and the microwave. And, yeah, so 12 years, G. 12 years as teammates. It feels a bit weird now to not really be teammates anymore. But, yeah, I mean, pretty cool, pretty special to be in that close to G for so long, and being with one person. I mean, I can remember turning pro for the first time back in 2008, and G was in a very similar position. He'd been there for a year before me already, and I can just remember having someone at least to relate to, being sort of stuck out in the middle of Italy and middle of nowhere, and not understanding really anything that was going on, and having someone else who was in a relatively similar sort of situation to me. I think it was cool to have that bond like early on, and then joining Sky together, later becoming Ineos. G's always been a teammate. I mean, only the last few years did G really change his focus, I think, and really start focusing on stage racing. But that period especially, I think it brought us even closer in a way, because we were on the same program, doing all the same training camps together, and I think G for me was always someone who was dependable. Like through the Tour de France's I won, even later on. I mean, I think back to there's just so many stories we got together. I mean, even 2000, I think it was 2013, the first Tour de France I won. Got into Nice, G crashed and broke his pelvis, and still carried on for another 2.5 weeks, pushing on a broken pelvis, basically to help get me to Paris in the yellow jersey. Not many mates who would do that for you. So
no one, mate. No one would.
What was Chris like then, G? Any stories from the early days? I remember you telling me something about Chris turning up in a sort of traditional Kenyan. You referred to it as a skirt. I'm sure it wasn't actually a skirt.
Yeah, it's like he just got out the shower and just wrapped this thing around him. Just used to walk around with that. But no, exactly like Froome said. You know, I think we were just new to the whole pro scene for a start. Let alone, you know, Italian is or Italians in general are quite a bit different to you know, well, my culture that I'd grown up with in Wales, and especially Froome down in Africa. Yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but it was good times as well. Like Froome says, you know, it kind of brought us closer together, because we had that little thing in common, that we were different. You know, there's a couple of other South Africans in the team, Robbie Hunter, Daryl Impey, who's still racing now. He's actually racing in Israel with Froome at the moment. Steve Cummins, who we've had on the pod in previous episodes, he was there for a couple of years as well, and it was just a good group of us. You know, we had a real good time and really learned our trade almost. And yeah, we had the odd result along the way as well. Like I can remember Froome's first tour. I can't remember what year it was. Was it in? It must have been 2008 then. Froome.
2008 as a Neo Pro, yeah.
Yeah. So I had done it as a Neo the year before. I don't think I'd come out of the top, well, bottom 20 the whole race, apart from one or two stages. And I remember seeing Froome on one of the stages. I don't know if it was Alpe d'Huez or it was some sort of big climb, and he was there with like Menshov, who was like, he'd won like the Vuelta or something previous year, or it was just he was right up there in the mix anyway, top 20 on this climb, and I was just thinking, wow, like that's unreal. You know, this guy really has some potential, but he was such a raw talent as well. And I think you know, Froome would be first to admit he didn't really grow up as most people do, you know, watching pro cycling, reading the magazines, and, you know, watching Eurosport and listening to all the commentators, well, as we now realise, chat a load of rubbish. But, you know, he didn't grow up with that. He just sort of, you know, mountain biking and just a completely different route into it anyway.
Chris, your first Grand Tour, is it always a massive shock? So you will have seen other people race them, you will have read about them, but can anything really prepare you for the first time that you have to race for 3 weeks?
Not really, no. I think it was a little bit different for me because my first Grand Tour was as a Neo Pro, and it was the Tour de France, and I was just completely in the deep end. I mean, as G said, I got into cycling with a bit of mountain biking. Obviously, growing up in Africa, I loved cycling. I loved being on my bike, but I just had zero knowledge of road racing, of culture, of how things are done in professional road cycling. And I just came in, I guess, it's just really raw kid. I just had no idea of what I was doing really, and.
Oh, it just brings back some memories as Froome's chatting now. Like, do you remember when you cut your sleeves off your skin suit because they were? It's like when someone cuts your hair, but they cut a bit too much off. It was like that. And Froome basically started this TT with, well, like sleeveless skin suit basically.
It almost looked like what someone would use for Iron Man now, like one of those kind of sleeveless. I can't remember why I did it. There was some issue with my sleeves. Anyway, I cut them, and I cut them way too short, and they were basically, I was almost riding in this like sleeveless skin suit.
All the Italian like management were going nuts, weren't they?
But yeah, no, I mean, it was just this incredible. Going back to that 2008 tour, it was just this. I mean, first of all, I was just overwhelmed with the scale of everything. I'd done a bunch of other races before the tour, obviously on the pro calendar, but when you get to Tour de France, you realise pretty quickly this is the only race in the world that's like this. I mean, in terms of crowds, in terms of media, in terms of just the hype of everything. It was just like, whoa, this is something else. I can remember going to that very first sort of presentation at the Tour de France and just being blown away. I was just like, oh wow, okay, this is what sets the tour apart from everything else.
Does the idea of actually winning a Grand Tour, when you're doing your first one, does it just seem impossible? Does it seem so far away from where you are at that point?
For me personally, I didn't even have winning even on in my sort of wildest dreams. I think at that point I was thinking, if I can become a really good climber in the mountains, if I have an amazing day, I'd love to win a stage. That was my sort of, that would be the dream for me, is to go and win a stage of the Tour de France. Not in a million years at that point did I think I'd ever be able to be in the race to win overall.
Yeah, for me, I think I was even further away from Froome. You know, like I said, he, even in his first tour, I think he had a decent day and was up there in the mountains with some of the big names of the sport. For me, I was with some of the big names of the sport, but like the big sprinters, they're out the arse like half an hour down. And then in the sprint days, I was, at the back of all the climbers. So I was just like completely out of it. But at that time, I was a track rider, and I was just thinking, my pure focus here is just to get around and try and survive. Like, I don't know how you'd come into this race looking to try to win the thing. But we were kids really, and kids these days are a bit different, but they have a different upbringing, that's for sure. They didn't live the lives that we did.
They come into the Tour de France and win it first time round, don't they?
Exactly, yeah. So, little bastards.
Right, you two, take us into all the parts of a Grand Tour that those of us who will never ride one, those of us who watch on TV, would never be aware of. So we're used to these great battles in the mountains and tours being won there. But G, you've talked to me before about almost the hidden stresses of the first few days. The fact that everyone at that point is feeling good, no one's tired, the amount of stress in the bunch because no one's really won anything yet, there haven't been enough stages. Is that, in some ways, almost the trickiest part, those first 2-3 days?
Oh, most definitely. They're the most stressful, for sure, because, as you say, the first day might be a road stage, so the yellow jersey's up for grabs. First guy across the line is going to take that. So, instantly, every team thinks that they have a chance. Well, they do have a chance. And then, the first week generally is the flatter road, so, as you say, people aren't as tired. Everyone's fighting for position. Generally, there's a bit of wind because they're on the flatter northern roads of France. Smaller roads, so you can go from a big 3-lane road to a 1-lane road. Big fight for that. And it's just stress and tension in the group, and it's the biggest race. It's the race that everyone's been working to all year. Everybody wants to do well, whether you're a small team and you want to show yourself and win a stage, which will be massive for their sponsor, and then maybe move up the ladder in the sport, or you're a GC guy and you want to get through but you don't want to lose time. You've got the sprinters all flexing their muscles, getting their egos out and wanting to push themselves around and be there in the finishes, and it's just it's chaos basically, and it's definitely not the most enjoyable, but if you can do it, and if not that I enjoy it, but as long as you can sort of feel comfortable sort of fighting, holding that position, and you got some good teammates around you, you can also make a bit of space for each other, you can communicate well together. I think that's one of the big strengths that we have at the moment with Ineos, really. With myself and Luke and Kwiato, we've raced together for so long that it's second nature anyway, and that's a big help in that first week, because every year there's a load of crashes, and every year everyone's like, there's more crashes than normal this year, but they've been saying that every time I've done the tour, so it's one to sort of more try and just get through unscathed really than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. Just what G said. I mean, it is chaos. It's absolute chaos those first few days. You can train for an event like the Tour de France for months on end, making all the sacrifices, all the right things, but that can just be lost in the blink of an eye, like it was for me back in 2014. Day 3, touch of wheels in front of me, I went down and broken wrist, broken hand as well. That was it. That was the end of the tour, and there's just nothing that can really prepare you for that. I mean, you can do all the training you want, but when you've got over 200 guys fighting for that sort of front 2-3 lines in the peloton, it's natural. You're going to get guys who do push the limits, and there are going to be crashes, and it just depends what side of the crashes you're on. So it is very much a gamble, but having a strong team around you, having guys who you can depend on and you know each other, does play a huge part in it.
I think it has got slightly more stressful though. I don't know if you agree, Froomey, but and I don't know why. Maybe I think just the whole peloton is just stronger across the board now. There's more strength and depth. Younger guys as well. It's a younger peloton. It doesn't seem to be like the respect there used to be before.
Yeah, definitely. I think more strength and depth is certainly one aspect. I mean, there's more guys who have the legs to fight for those front positions. But I think also now, I mean, rewind 15, 20 years, there was a way of racing. Like, you wouldn't find guys fighting for position in those first few days the way we do now from kilometer zero. Because the race had a rhythm that it would start, the break would go, it would almost pre-decided sometimes who would go in the break, and then the race would slowly sort of build up momentum and get faster and faster towards the end. Whereas now, if like what G said, if there's a narrow road after 20 Ks, it's going to be a full-on fight, and all 200 guys want to be the first team through that section to the narrow road first. So it's just, I mean, the dynamics of the sport have changed. I think having more data available as well has sort of proven to teams and the directors that, I mean, positioning counts more than anything in those kind of positions, and that just increases the stress even more when you've got all the directors saying we have to be the first team through that point. All 20 teams are being told the same thing, so yeah, if it's your job to get your team in there first, you'll take whatever risk you need to move your guys up.
Yeah, Velo Viewer doesn't do us any favours, does it?
Not
every
now.
team looking at every dodgy part of the road, yeah.
Once you get to the physical level where you are a contender for the yellow jersey, how do you go about strategizing an attempt on winning the GC?
G, do you want to go first, or shall I take that one?
I think you've got more experience, mate. You take it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to play towards your strengths. I always enjoyed, when I came into the tour in great shape, I always enjoyed trying to get an advantageous position over my rivals early doors, and then hold on to it and have the team to support and defend. Other guys, I think, would take a completely different approach, like looking at Pogacar when he won the Tour. He didn't necessarily have a really strong team in terms of the depth of riding on the front every day and defending, and his style of riding was probably more explosive, more erratic, I guess. So it almost suited him not to have the jersey earlier on. But yeah, for me personally, it was always try and target one or two of the first mountain stages and really just go to town there, and then it made life a lot simpler. Try and hold on to that, and let other teams try and take it off you. But the later it gets in the race, the more risky it became for them to make those moves.
Yeah, I think the deeper you get into the race as well, there's a lot more other races within the Tour that come into play. So, it's not just the yellow jersey up for grabs, there's white jersey, polka dot, green, white jersey, obviously young rider, green jersey, points, polka dot, king of the mountains. So, a lot of other teams' tactics and things change coming into the end week of the end few stages of the race as well. I mean, it's kind of like a big game of chess on wheels and things. But the one negative everyone always talks about, you know, if Froome takes the jersey so early, is just with recovery wise, you know, because when you got the jersey, he's got to go do media every day, answer the same 3 questions to like 10 different bloody people. Like, it'd just be a lot simpler if they all just listened to the first interview.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you should be, Tom. And then you know, then there's like obviously dope control and you know, the podium stuff. But I think when you're actually in the jersey though, I think, well, speaking from my experience, I've only really done it once, so, but I think the positive, the buzzing off of having that jersey outweighed the extra bit of recovery which you miss out on.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Also buys you a little bit more maneuvering space in the peloton. I mean, you just find that people kind of give you that extra foot of space to move around. If you need to get up to the front and you're in the leader's jersey, you find people are like, oh, that's the leader, better let him past. Whereas if you're just some numpty coming along from the back, it's like, no, that half a foot just closes. It goes the other way if you're in the leader's jersey.
Is it always possible to work out what the decisive days will be? Because I guess you can look at the parcours, you can look at the road book and you can pick out the big mountain days, but sometimes it'll just be a blowy day, won't it? Or there'll be a split in the bunch for a different reason, and then is it more about reacting to what's happening on the road rather than the plan you've had in advance?
Yeah, I think beforehand you definitely pick out the big days, and you know the days that'll definitely be decisive, but then there's definitely the stages where, like you say, even, you know, one thing that grates me sometimes is transitional stages, when everyone bangs on, oh yeah, it's just a transition stage, you know, there'll be a breakaway and, you know, the guys will come in 10 minutes behind, or, you know, oh, this is a sprint day, you know, mid-race is fine. But some of those days can be the hardest, you know, they're just up and down all day, you know, it's just bike racing. Like, some teams just think of, you know, think out the box sometimes and have some crazy tactics, and the race blows apart. But when you look back, those days are just great to be a part of in that race. And I remember one stage, it must have been in 13 for me, I think, because it was maybe towards the end of the first week, so I was still suffering with my pelvis, and then I think Pete Kenner got wiped out. These are all in our team with Sky at the time. So it was me, Froome. Pete Kenyak, I think, somebody crashed him just before the start of the first climb. Richie Port was on a bad day, just was off and just got dropped. I think Edvald, something had happened to him as well, and basically Froome was left in front in a group of like 20 with maybe 4 Movistar guys.
Seven Movistar.
7?
Okay, 7. And yeah, but like when you look back, days like that, like obviously Froome won the Tour that day because he was able to sort of get around that day and not lose any time. Like, I think it helped a lot that we had Nico Portal in the car as well behind, just guiding Froome through it. But just days like that, I think that was probably a GC day anyway, to be fair. But it's just so much can happen, and you can plan all you like, but yeah, you probably, by the time you finish the Tour, you're down at, you know, plan X and Y rather than you know, A and B.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the reasons why now you're seeing a lot of the big GC teams, and you'll definitely agree with this one, G, but going in with potentially plan A, plan B and plan C in terms of GC riders as well, going in with multiple leaders, because I mean, you just can't put all your eggs in one basket, and when you do, I mean, you've got to accept that there might be a touch of wheels, and that's your whole Tour de France plan out the window. Yeah,
and there's a fine balance as well, because I think there's having those leaders, but you still need a ranking within those leaders, and those leaders can't be all thinking of themselves 100% from the start, because then otherwise, you know, you get to the last few days and your leader hasn't been as protected as maybe he could have, and might not win, if that makes any sense. So I think that's the strength in our team at the moment, where there isn't any egos and everyone sort of gets behind the main focus, but everyone knows in the back of their mind they can just change, like in a blink of an eye.
It does become super tricky. I mean, onto the whole sort of subject of inter-team rivalry. I mean, it's just, you look at, I think it worked really well with you and me, G, in the sense that we're both very similar riders, and what we'd ask the team to do in terms of, okay, we're going to ride this climb hard or not, or it would kind of work for both of us. Where it gets tricky is when I think you've got different kinds of leaders within the team. So maybe one really strong time trialist and one pure climber. And it's like, okay, do we go full gas on the climb and set it up for the climber to attack? But that might put our guy who's strong at time trialing in the red, basically. So that's where it gets a lot more tricky and makes planning a lot more difficult in the team.
What about the tiredness? Do you get a gradual build-up of it, or is there sometimes just a day you have, I don't know, maybe in the second week, where it suddenly becomes apparent? And if you do you have to play little mental games like, well, look, okay, my legs feel worse than they did, but everyone's legs are going to feel worse because we've done a week and a half of the Tour or the Giro or the Vuelta?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are days where you wake up and you literally feel as if you didn't sleep. It feels like you might as well have done a Ironman the night before or something. Your whole body hurts, and you've got to get on the bike, put on a brave face, and go and stand on that start line and sort of put on that brave face and try and defend that jersey. So I mean, there are days like that, but you've just got to almost tell yourself mentally, well, if I feel like that, then chances are the guy next to me feels exactly the same, if not worse. And quite often those are the kind of days where you start off and you just feel terrible. You're like, okay, I'm just going to be limiting losses today. You can feel you're terrible. But 2 hours into the race, you look around and there's actually no one in your group who looks as if they're going anywhere. Everyone's just on the limit, and you kind of, those are the days you kind of like, okay, well, comparatively, I'm actually not that bad, and you can actually end up making the most out of those days. But 100%, I mean, there are other days where you wake up and you can feel instantly from the start. You're just like, okay, today's a good day. The legs are just turning that much easier. You start the first climb or whatever it is, and you can see a few people sort of like rocking on the bike. You're like, okay, well, they're hurting, I'm not. Today's going to be a good day.
They're by far the best days, aren't they? But I think it's definitely a mental game, like Froome saying, you know, like not getting wrapped up in your own little world. Like, it's so easy to think, oh man, I'm bad, my legs are hurting, guy, he must be good, like, you know, he's got his team on the front, like they must be going for the stage because he's feeling good, like, and you know, so many different things can go around in your head. And then sometimes when you are just on a bad day and you've got to try to limit your losses, like Froome probably does, well, he doesn't have too much experience of that, but you know, I think when you're just not on top of your game, you know, such fine margins, especially these days, you know, as we said, the depth of the sport is so strong now. It's like, they're the days where you win the Tour, win or lose, is on your worst days rather than on your best, I find anyway. But yeah, it's as they say, that top inch, you know, I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to a Grand Tour, because it's just so intense as well, the whole circus around, well, you and the team and everything for those 3 weeks.
It strikes me a little that Grand Tours are almost like test match cycling. So,
they're more exciting than test matches. Come on.
Well, I think test match is going to be absolutely thrilling, G. I was going to say, like, when you win the Giro, Chris, in 2018, and you had that crash, didn't you? Was it in the recon for the prologue in Jerusalem?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So then, in the same way as that opening batsman might have a fast bowler whistling the ball past his nose and he might be playing and missing, but ultimately it doesn't matter because you just survive. For you in that Giro, which you end up winning in such spectacular fashion, in that sort of, I don't know, whatever it was, a week, first 10 days, when your body is trying to recover from that crash, are you just thinking, I'm still in here, I'm still batting?
I was going to say, your analogy is not quite there. I'd say it's more like the opening.
It's quite stretched.
Opening fast bowler, lobbing one straight at your head and hitting you square on. Yeah, that was just a mental Grand Tour for me. I mean, it started off, that crash really put me on the back foot before the race even began, and for the first 2 weeks I was just surviving, limiting losses, going into every day knowing I'm going to lose time today. I'm just going to try and like limit that, but just keeping some little candle burning, thinking, okay, in the last week things will eventually click, and I'm going to try trying to make things right. And I think the Giro is probably the only Grand Tour where that kind of possibility exists, especially that Giro that I won in 2018 was so heavily loaded in the last week, and coming into the days building up to that Col de Finestra stage, there were cracks showing in Simon Yates, who'd been basically dominating the race from the beginning. That also gave me a little bit of hope, and then we had this sort of the Queen stage, if you like, that on paper just looked like this mammoth day, with a big climb quite early on, and it was like, okay, well, if anything's gonna change in this race, it's gonna have to be today. And so it was sort of made the call with Nicolas Portal and Tim Kerrison, and basically just said, okay, we're gonna go all in on this day. And I was in a position where I wasn't even on the podium at that point, and I was like, well, I've got nothing to lose here. So I think had I been second or third, it wouldn't have worked out that way, because we probably wouldn't have been willing to risk everything just for that stage. So being so far back, it gave me that perfect opportunity just to say, okay, right, first big climb of the day, I'm going to get absolutely stuck in and just put the blinkers on, and it's a 3-hour time trial basically, or whatever it was. So yeah, that was by far the most mental day of racing I've ever had, and the one that will probably be remembered most from my career to date. I mean, it was like rewinding sort of 30 years in cycling. You don't see Grand Tours being really decided in that way anymore.
Gee, what did you think of that day? Where were you? Were you in Tenerife, or were you on a training camp somewhere?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. We were in Tenerife. We were actually travelling home, and we were due to leave at, for argument's sake, 4 o'clock, and this stage was happening, and it was like still about 20 minutes to go, and we're like, well, we can't go to the airport yet. And we all just stood there in one of the guys' rooms just watching the end of it, and it was just, as Froome says, it's like you rarely see that these days, you know. Everything's a lot more calculated and controlled. Yeah, just watching that stage, it was just like, it was epic, and it's probably Froome's, well, I'd say best win, but he's had a few good ones, but it's just one that really stands out, and everyone, it was just one of those days that everyone will always remember.
It struck me from the outside that it was beautifully unpredictable, that one. But then I've also got to mention, Chris, the time that you win the Tour de France and you run up Mont Ventoux.
You would mention that, wouldn't you?
Talk of things you can't plan for.
Yeah, I mean that was again just one of these moments in cycling that you'd never see anything like that happening. I mean, it just the finish was moved closer because of massive winds up on Mont Ventoux that day, and they hadn't had time to put the barriers up in the last few kilometers, so that where the barriers would have normally been were absolutely crammed with crowds that had all come down the mountain, and the motorbike at the front of the race basically couldn't get through, slammed on brakes in front of us, and we just went piling into the back of this motorbike. And Richie and Balco Molema, who I was with at the time, they both got back on and carried on. I got on and just heard this huge crack as soon as I pushed, and looked down, and my rear chainstay was snapped. So I mean, there's nothing I could do. The bike was broken. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get a spare bike anytime soon, because the car's miles back. It's stuck behind riders who have just been dropped, sort of coming up Ventoux. And it was just this desperation. I knew I was just over a kilometre from the finish, and I knew I wasn't going to get a bike anytime soon. So it was almost as if it didn't even take time to think about it. It was just like, well, I've got to keep going here. I've got to keep going forwards. And I knew that they did have barriers at least in the last kilometre. So I figured if I can run from here until I get into the last K, then at least a car will be able to get to me, because it can get through the crowds and it can get through everything else. So it was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna set off on foot for the next few hundred meters, and yeah, hopefully a bike will arrive sometime soon. The biggest thing, actually, the motorbike behind us was what rode over my bike and broke my rear stay. So we crashed into the motorbike in front, and the motorbike behind us also didn't react in time and basically rode over my bike while it was on the ground, and I've got a feeling he might have done that.
Thanks very much.
He might have done that on purpose, but.
Did you get a bike off the neutral service car? I'm trying to remember. Was it a ludicrously small bike they brought you first?
Yeah, it wasn't a bike. It was a tricycle. I don't know why they had tricycles on the top of the car, but yeah, that was entertaining, I guess.
Just thinking about epic days with Thrumi, like I remember one where it wasn't even a mountain day, but it was a crosswinds day, and it was so stressful from kilometre zero, and nothing was happening, but there was just so much stress and sprinting out of every corner, into every town, trying to hold position, and you had to be mentally switched on the whole time. And then it was literally like 6k or so to go, and Peter Sagan and a teammate of his ended up riding off the front, and Froome followed. I followed him, and next thing you know, the four of us are away, and we were just like through and off with those guys for the last like 5-6k, and that was one of the, well, we didn't win or anything. Sagan won, Froome gained, no, it wasn't even a massive amount of time, but that was one of the days which always sticks out in my head as just a real sort of good day, just because it's I don't know, you feel like you get one up on everyone, and it's just it was so enjoyable to do. You know,
it was just bike racing, wasn't it? I mean, it was what was quite cool.
And
yeah, that's it. It was spontaneous. It was one of those situations you'd never be able to plan for. But it was just, we hit this roundabout, and the bunch was lined out, and Sagan went with a teammate, and it was like, hold on a second, we can go too. And it was just one of those mental situations. I can remember coming to the last few hundred meters and just thinking, okay, I'm sure we've got to try and win the stage here, but it is Peter Sagan, and it's like I think I tried to sprint, but it was just almost embarrassing.
He was like a motorbike that day, though. I remember like my turn on the front was recovery, and then as soon as I got back on the wheel and Sagan was on the front, I was sprinting full gas just to hold the wheel. Oh, it was unbelievable. That was.
It was incredible. It was incredible.
So talk to me about rest days, this very curious thing from an amateur's perspective, where you have a rest day and you don't appear to rest. You decide to go for a bike ride of at least 2 hours.
Yeah, I think everyone's different. But yeah, most people, well, yeah, everyone always goes out on their bike. But yeah, for myself, I kind of feel like I kind of have to go out and keep the body going and ticking over. I have to do a little bit extra, just to, you know, bit of a sweat. And cause otherwise, if I do stop, if I did nothing, for instance, the next day, I'd feel absolutely terrible. Yes, we always get out for, yeah, at least hour and a half, more around 2 hours, and you probably try and find a little climb close by. Yeah, get a little sweat on it there. But generally, you end up staying in the same sort of, especially in the Tour, you always end up in the similar sort of areas for your rest day. So, like Po is a good place. You always hope to have a rest day in Po. It's the best hotel of the whole Tour. But the rest of the time, like, you think we'd have nice hotels, but it's terrible. Like some of the places we stay, like Campaniles are one of the best. Just because.
Really?
Oh yeah, because if you have your own room, if you're sharing with someone, Campaniles are terrible because you can't even open your suitcase without the other person getting knocked on the head. But if you've got your own room, at least the aircon generally works. We've got our chef, so the food doesn't matter, and we've got our own mattresses, so Campaniles are okay. But I'm telling you, some of these hotels we've stayed in are just ridiculous.
I mean, they're not far. A lot of the places you stay are not far off a dormitory, like a boarding school dormitory, where you probably have to go and open your suitcase in the bathroom because there's not enough there's not enough space like around the bed to actually put a suitcase down and open it. It's pretty dire, actually. I mean, if you compare it with I'd say any top level sport, it's it definitely takes you back a few years.
I remember the rest day in the 2018 Tour, in the second one in Carcassonne, almost everyone was staying, media-wise or fans or people associated with the race, were all staying in or close to the old town, and everyone had a view out the window of the beautiful castle in Carcassonne. And then you guys were in a Campanile, not really in Carcassonne with a view of the castle, but by some major road right on the edge of town. It was really strange coming out to your press conference to what, you know, it was the sort of hotel where let's say you had a breakdown in the car and you couldn't get a breakdown recovery, and you just had to, look, it's a 50 quid hotel, we'll just kip in here for the night and then move on. And that's where you guys were.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how we spent the 3 weeks. But it's not so bad, though. You know, at least we got our chefs. Like, that's what we look forward to at the end of every day, other than the rice. But they can even jazz that up a bit, so.
Chris, we've got lots of questions from our fellow GTCC club members. So I want to pile into those. But before we do, to complete our little tour of a Grand Tour, tell me what that final day in the leader's jersey is like, if you know that the GC is safe, and then tell me what the evening is like, the celebrations, the party when you've had nothing to party about for 3 weeks.
That last day sometimes can just be, it's a really weird mixture of emotions, because that last day is almost a celebration. I mean, you're rolling into Paris, it's a procession. So in theory the race is over, but it's not actually over, not until you've sort of crossed that final finish line. So are you going to go down as the first rider in history to lose it on that last day, except for Fignon with his ponytail, or is it, or can you actually celebrate it properly and drink your champagne or your beer with your teammates on the bike on the way in, and thoroughly enjoy it? And it's just this sort of mixture, because you want to let go and you want to enjoy it, but at the same time, also that Champs-Élysées isn't easy. I mean, those cobbles, it's a rough stage, and thinking of all the possibilities of what could go wrong, apart from crashing and everything else. I mean, just getting a mechanical in the last lap of the Champs-Élysées, there's quite a realistic chance of that happening. I think I remember one year, 2 laps to go, coming in and getting a McDonald's bag stuck in my rear derailleur and having to do a bike change. Thankfully, I think I had a couple minutes on GC to play with, but so it wasn't absolute panic stations. But if that happened to you on the last lap and you only had a 20-30 second lead, it would be touch and go if you'd make it or not. So I mean, it is stressful. Certainly massive sigh of relief when you roll into those last few 100 meters and you know it's sealed, it's done, and that's when the emotions really, I guess, start to hit home, that you've won a Grand Tour or the Tour de France. And then again, the party, after party, I don't know if you feel the same here, but it's a strange one. It's not as if you can just go absolutely full gas and enjoy it with all your mates, and it's still, part of it feels like work, because you've got sponsors around, you've got VIPs of the team around, and people who you haven't been part of your, I guess, bubble for the last month. But at the same time, you really just want to enjoy it and celebrate with the people who have been part of that journey over the last month. So it's a mixture of 2 different worlds coming together on that last night, and it's a funny one. Again, you can, and also, I mean, having 1 or 2 beers and you feel absolutely wasted. I mean, you haven't had a drop of alcohol for months, most likely, coming into that point. So I mean, and everyone's tired, everyone's been through the ringer for the last few weeks, so there are a lot of emotions. Then you've got people who've just pitched up for the party and expecting a massive night, and so I mean, it's a real mixture of everything really going on at once.
Yeah, a lot of hangers on sometimes, but I just tend to when I won, it was just get blotto and just speak to the sponsors and hopefully they still like you the next day. But
make some good speeches, AG. That's your forte.
Yeah, we'll leave that. We'll leave them out.
I mean, imagine forgetting your own teammate's name, G, on the podium when he's actually standing next to you.
Yeah, I didn't forget Froome, or maybe did I? No,
it wasn't me.
It was just a delay in my speech. You know, it's all about timing, isn't it? A good speech. That's what it was. But it's also talking about, you know, the last day. It's completely different being someone like a domestique, like a helper throughout the whole tour. Because the last day, obviously, you still need to be switched on. You still need to help. But it's totally different to winning, because you know, when I'd won and was riding into Paris, I'd only had 2 beers the night before because I wanted to still be treated as another stage. Like, I'm not risking this for anything, you know, something silly. But for instance, in 2013, when, you know, I'd ridden, well, I fractured my pelvis on day 1, and then this was like, got to the finish, you know, stage 20, the race is pretty much over. Froome had won, he'd had, I think it was a couple of minutes lead, and we were on the bus and we were all having a couple of beers, you know, and then Dave and Tim come on. Dave be the boss and Tim the coach, and they're like, okay, yeah boys, 2 or 3, yeah, that's enough, but get your heads down now, it's still a stage tomorrow. Everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, but just go in and just start drinking wine with the doc. And then, you know, we're having some food and then go back to the doc's room and having a few more beers, and wake up in the morning and I was just like, what have I done? Like, why did I do that? Like, why didn't I just wait 24 hours? But yeah, you can't help yourself sometimes. And there's been times when we finished, I think when we finished in 15 at Alpe d'Huez, was it, through me?
Yeah.
You're at altitude then as well, so you've just done, you know, 3 weeks of super hard racing. You're at altitude, you have a few beers then, and that goes straight to your head, and you're coming down the bus, because we travel to Paris the next day, so we go down Alpe d'Huez on a big bus with, you know, 2 or 3 other teams, like a big, you know, over 60s tour around France or whatever. Drive into the airport, and then you get a flight to Paris, jump on another bus which takes you to your team bus at the start, and those days so long, and yeah, if you're nursing a bit of a fuzzy head and stuff, and then you're like, oh man, we've still got a race, because, you know, for the sprinters and stuff, it's the biggest stage they can win, you know, it's one of their biggest victories, so it means so much to half the race. The other half are just like, oh, let's just get to the party. So it is a weird, you need to, yeah, now I'm a bit older and wiser, I definitely would just hold back a bit of that stage 20 night.
Cool. Well, listen, let's have some questions for you, Chris, from our fellow GTCC club members. The first of these comes from Chris Gams. He wants to know, which is your standout win at a Grand Tour and why?
Cool. I'd have to pick that 2018 Giro, I think, just given how the race unfolded and the fact that it was the Giro. For me personally, I'd always said the Giro would be the hardest Grand Tour for me to win. It just doesn't play to my strengths. It's almost like a whole string of classics all put together, and it's just such an unpredictable race. So I'd say, yeah, that Giro and winning it in that fashion was probably the most standout victory of them all.
There's a lot of questions actually about that 2018 Giro from people, not least Nigel Hooper and Alex Fox, and we have talked about it a little bit. So I suppose the best way of concentrating it is, at what point on that stage did you think that not only it was possible that you could overhaul Simon Yates, but you might actually win? Because it was one of those days where, as somebody who likes cycling, your phone was just lighting up all the time with people who occasionally dip into cycling, watching live text, watching it on their phones, suddenly all piling in, totally engrossed with what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, it went from being, I guess, a gamble to try and win the stage and potentially move up onto the podium of the GC, to actually seeing on the road, just seeing that time gap growing and growing, probably coming into the last 20-30 Ks that, hold on, I've done enough here to get myself into pink, now I need to actually hold that up the last climb as well. It was very much I mean, it went from, it evolved as the break went on, and I think it was just a combination of so many factors coming together that could have never been planned beforehand. I mean, things like the fact that Tom Dumoulin was left with no teammates. If he'd had 2 guys with him, that would have probably been the end of me. He would have been able to sit on the wheels, his teammates would have paced him to the bottom of the last climb, and he would have been fresh and probably closed the majority of that gap on his own. The fact that Reitenbach, that GC group that was chasing me decided to wait for Reitenbach, who's notoriously bad at descending, and there were some pretty tricky descents there. That could have never been something that I'd sort of put into the equation either, because I mean, I'd get to the bottom of each descent and the gap had just gone up another 45 seconds. It's like, how did that happen? I wasn't even pedaling. So I mean, stuff like that. There were just so many factors that came together on that day that made it possible, and something that just probably wouldn't be repeatable ever again.
Here's a question from Oscar, who is 10 years old, and Oscar would like to know, if you could only keep one of your 7 Grand Tour wins, which would it be? Is that the Giro again, or is it your first tour?
I'd have to go for my first tour there, I think. Just given what it means in cycling, given that it's the holy grail of Grand Tour racing and or professional bike racing, I guess. That's something that is life-changing, and more so than other Grand Tours.
We've got a few Saki questions from some of our members, not least Rowan, Carl and Hugh, who all, Chris, want to know, how do you know when you're going when you look at your stem so much?
Yeah, cheers for that, guys. Yeah, I don't. And still you end up crashing more than me, G, so don't know how that works, but no, yeah, I can always see just a few meters ahead of me, and I guess that's enough. But yeah, you won't catch me staring at my stem descending at 80 k's an hour. It will most likely be only when I'm going uphill that I'll let my head drop.
Cool. Here's one from Neil Shepherd. Why do you keep doing it? You've won everything you set out to achieve, but you keep coming back.
Yeah, I ask myself the same question sometimes as well. No, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest overwhelming factor for me was when I crashed, is I wasn't ready to hang it up. I came into cycling pretty late. It took me a good few years to sort of figure out how things are done and how to get the best out of myself. And I think it's definitely, I didn't want to go out in that fashion. I wanted to be able to go out in my own terms when I'm ready, and once I've actually I feel as if I've done the most that I can in my career, and I feel as if I've still got more to achieve.
A couple of questions that we might refer to as questions from the man with his name above the door, because Garrett has told us a couple of stories about you in the course of Series 1 of his podcast, and I would like your take on them, please. The first one involves a very weird drink he once saw you drinking. Gee, you described this for me. You always said was it like a load of hay and hot water or something?
I don't know about hay, but it was like, yeah, some sort of a bush. And yeah, it was before the national time trial, actually, 2 days before. Froomey basically ended up feeding me about 6 of these. He only had 2, sly little dog. That difference grows every time you talk about it. First it was one extra, and then it's 2 extra, now it's 2 to 6.
So this was a cocktail, was it? A Kenyan cocktail that you made, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. So what G's referring to is a drink that we drink in East Africa called dawa, which means medicine, translated directly. And it's basically just vodka, squeezed lime, and honey. So nothing to really dilute it down much. It's just pure vodka with a bit of lime and honey. Lovely combination if you're in the mood for it.
Okay, and the second story we heard about you was a story about a training camp on Tenerife, and Wout Powell's came up with this one when he was a guest on the show, which involves very bad weather on the top of Mount Taylor, a snowstorm where you've stayed inside, G and Wout have gone out, and then when they've got back and you've found out that they've gone out, you have taken a look, put your warm stuff on, and gone out yourself.
Yeah, that was one of those days where you look outside and you're just like, it was miserable, it was horrible. And I was just like, I'm not going out there. I got on the turbo trainer, sat there on the turbo trainer, feeling sorry for myself, sweating on the turbo trainer, only to have G and Wout get back a few hours later and say to me, oh, it was actually fine out there. And at that point it was like, okay, well, I'm going to go change, get rugged up, and I'm going to go out there as well. Because, yeah, I just couldn't face sitting on the turbo any longer.
Okay, and I think our final questions on this, I'm going to ask you both the same question, but obviously it will flip round. G, I want to know from you what makes Chris such a great GC rider? And then, Chris, I'd like the same from you. What makes G such a great GC rider?
Well, with Froomey, I think definitely his the mental side. Obviously, super talented on a bike, as we all know. But I think just that mental sort of never say die attitude, and just that determination and the fight he has in him. You know, even now, you know, after such a horrific injury, still to keep working so hard to come back at a good level. So, yeah, I'd say definitely is top inch.
Turning that round to G, I'd say his tenacity.
Oh, that's a good one. Thanks,
I don't
mate.
think I know anyone quite as tenacious as G. Work ethic. I mean, when G puts his mind to something, I think everything else, the world could be melting around him, and he'd just carry on doing his 6-hour low carb ride, and nothing else would matter. So yeah,
Tidy would be blowing up. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. The volcano would be exploding, and G would be like, "No, I've got to get to the top and keep pushing." But yeah, no, just really work ethic is the biggest thing that I admired from G. I mean, whatever sacrifice it took, he'd do it.
Cheers, mate. You can come again.
Cool. You got to come on my YouTube channel someday.
Yeah, for sure. Mates rates. Oh, cheers. Thanks for coming through me.
Cool, guys. Yeah, good to chat to you, and it's been a lot of fun.
So, Tom, now is the point where we usually do any other business, but seeing we've been on a break, I don't suppose, well, there's much to talk about, is there?
Well, you say that, G. I've actually been quite busy. And I've got some good news to share. So, thanks to the tremendous planning of one of our members, Chris Gams, and our producers, Louise and Fionn, the GTCC group rides on ZWIFT are continuing through the summer. So, they'll be at the usual time of 6 p.m. every Wednesday. If you're already on ZWIFT, make sure you join in. If you want to give it a go, just go to ZWIFT.com and start your free trial. Gee, you'll join a few, won't you, when you're not racing? And the piles that Chris Hoy says that I have are slowly clearing up. So, you know, I'm back in the game too.
Oh, that's great news, Tom. I'm glad to hear that. But, yeah, no, I'll definitely be there. If might even jump on after stage 5 of the time trial of the Tour de France.
That's big chat. I'll believe that when I see
Not
it.
really. Yeah, I'm only joking. I'm definitely not doing that. But, yeah, no, when I can, I will.
Brilliant. Shall we have a few shout-outs to finish?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one from Jenny Pitt, who she came off a bike accident with a large cow a few weeks ago.
What?
Yep. We've even got, she posted pictures on a Facebook group to prove it. Dislocated her shoulder. So, Jenny, wish you a speedy recovery.
Yeah, good luck, Jenny. Paul Stubbs is back with another book recommendation for June, and this time it's The Monuments by Pete Cossins, who's a very nice man. This pretty much does what it says on the tin, really. It's a history of the monuments, all the grit and glory of cycling's greatest one-day races, so give that a try over the summer.
And finally, huge shout out to Bruce Haxton, who at the time of recording this podcast is halfway through an epic 2,300 kilometre cycle ride in Thailand, raising money for elephants in the mountains of Chiang Mai. So by the time you hear this, Bruce, I'm sure you'll be done and sipping on a nice cold beer to celebrate. Cheers, mate. That's
it from us for this week. If you want some more GTCC action, make sure you join our Facebook group and follow our socials at GTCC_ on Twitter and at GT Cycling Club on Instagram.
We also have weekly Club ZWIFT rides on Wednesdays, 6 p.m. UK time. So make sure you come in, meet up with your fellow GTCC members.
We'll see you soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Crowd Network, a place where you belong.